talk a little bit about what you might be able to do to get us to start talking to each other again?
First of all, the president has the greatest megaphone in the world. And I remember I've said this before, words matter. And words for the president matter. And so the first thing is, if not only through my words, but through my actions, I start setting the example to people that I'm willing to work with the other side. Not just by this, but by actually doing things with them. And that's the biggest tragedy I think about what happened with Kevin McCarthy this week. Those 8 people voted him out because he made a compromise with the Democrats. Of course, the irony is that the only way they got him out was they all voted with the Democrats. That seems hypocritical to me, but we'll leave that for another day. So the first thing is you got to show it with your actions. And I'll give you an example from when I was governor. When I was running in 2009, I was running against the incumbent Democrat, John Corzine. And the building trades unions, the carpenters, the pipe fitters, the plumbers, all those guys and women, they endorsed Corzine. And at the speech they gave endorsing him, the guy who's in charge of all the building trades said to the Governor Corzine, "Governor, don't worry, we're going to make sure you win. Not only are you going to win, but we are going to kick Christie's ass up one end of the New Jersey Turnpike and down the other." I won. So now, these guys and women are petrified. Because they remember what they said about me. And I think they know I've remembered too. So my second week in office, I said to my deputy chief of staff, invite all the heads of the building trades to the governor's mansion for breakfast. She said, really? I said, yes, all of them. So I came downstairs that morning. They were all sitting around that big dining room table. And I'm sitting right across from the guy who said he was going to kick my ass from one end of the New Jersey Turnpike to the other. Billy Mullins is his name. And Billy stood up. He said, "Governor, thanks so much for having us." And we shook hands, and he said to me, "You know, when I came to the gate this morning and gave my name, I thought it wouldn't open." And I said, "It did, though, didn't it, Billy?" And he said, "Yeah." So I want to make one thing clear to all you guys. We can fight for the next 8 years. I said, or we can work together, and we can create jobs for your members and make their lives better. I'm willing to do either, but I prefer to work with you, and that's why I have you here this morning. 4 years later, they all endorsed me, a Republican. The unions endorsed a Republican because I gave them my word and I kept it. When we had issues that they were concerned about, I gave them a hearing. I didn't always agree with them, but they always had an ability to make their voice heard, and if I thought I could help them, I did. And we worked on a lot of stuff together, and we did a lot of good things together. And I think if you went back and talked to any of them, they would tell you that we had and have a great relationship. That's the second thing you need to do. You need to reach out to the people who have worked against you and let them know now, when the election is over, it's all of us. And when all of us do well, that's a good thing for the country. The third thing a president needs to do is, as I mentioned before, is spend the time around the country talking to people and listening. I did over 200 town halls when I was governor of New Jersey, and some of them were pretty raucous and some of them were relatively calm, but I did them because I said to my staff, I can stay in touch with people that way. I don't only hear what I hear in the media, but I hear directly from people. And they're a little intimidated because you're the governor sometimes they're not intimidated at all. But I would hear what was on their mind, because I would do it just like I'm doing it here. There were no prearranged questions or anything else. People just raise their hand and I call them. I think as president you have to do the same thing, or else you remain out of touch. And when you do that, the country believes they have a president who cares about what they think. That helps to bring us together. The last thing is, we've got to get rid of some of the really horribly inflammatory language we've been using. Look, I'm from New Jersey. So we get an A in inflammatory language. Right? We're edgy, we're tough, we got a chip on our shoulder.
I was born there.
Oh, where were you born?
Newark.
Newark, me too. Right, so, Benjamin Franklin used to say about New Jersey, we're a keg tapped at two ends. New York and Philadelphia, right? And so we're stuck in the middle. We don't have our own TV network. We have New York and Philadelphia. So we have an edge. But there's a time to use There's a time not to. And my tougher language, almost always, I make some mistakes every once in a while. We all do. But they're the exception. My tougher language is geared towards trying to get something done. Try to push people to get something done. Not to just make fun of somebody. Not to pick on their weaknesses. Not to belittle them and make them feel like they were nothing. I can criticize their positions, but not who they were. And what we've gotten from Donald Trump is awful, awful stuff. You know, did you see what he said about John Kelly, who was his longest-serving chief of staff yesterday? Small brain. Awful job. He picked this guy to be Secretary of Homeland Security and to be his chief of staff, and he was his longest-serving chief of staff. Now, because Kelly disagrees with him, all of a sudden Kelly's an idiot and a bad person. Like, we have set up a circumstance in this country with him as our leader where that stuff has become acceptable and in some cases required. And guess what? It's split up families and friends. There are people now who, you know, you can't go to a Thanksgiving dinner or to a cocktail party. People start talking about politics and they can't even speak to each other. It didn't used to be that way. We disagree. But it wouldn't cause people to storm out or yell and scream at each other or say you're no good because you believe this or that, or she's voted for Democrats, so I can't talk to her anymore, right? I mean, like, it's just not the way it is. But it's the way it's become.
Well, the 24-hour news cycle also feeds it because it's important to be first, and then you can contradict yourself and amend it.
Well, some people are willing to do that. He's willing to do it within a 24-hour news cycle, right? Say one thing or another. But here's the thing. The 24-hour news cycle, I blame a little bit on that. But it's what you say in the 24-hour news cycle. If you act like an abusive bully, that's going to get reported. If you don't, look, the other good thing about the 24-hour news cycle is they need to report something. Right? They always need something more. And it depends on what you give them. And so, I think in all those ways, you can help change it. And the last way is this. The way you conduct yourself in your life, your example, can help to bring the country back together. Who do you meet with? Who do you have to the White House? Who do you go and visit? Look, I'm telling you right now, you let me president, I'm going to be friends with Democrats. I just am, because they got elected too. And so, you know, it doesn't mean I always agree with them, and I'll have good fights with them. The guy Steve Sweeney I talked about before, we had a great relationship for 8 years. It wasn't perfect. I remember one morning going down on a Sunday morning to the end of the driveway, and I picked up the biggest newspaper in the state, and it said, Sweeney calling, I want to punch Christie in the head. It wasn't always nice. But 4 days later, I got sick. And they had to take me to the hospital, an asthma attack. And I'm laying in the hospital. I was fine. But my phone rang and had no caller ID on it. And I was bored, sitting in this gurney, right? So I answered it. I heard this voice go, Governor? And I said, yeah, hey, Steve. And he goes, you're not going to die, are you? And I said, no, I'm not. And he goes, good. Because that's what really matters. He goes, how about we get together tomorrow or the next day and just hash all this stuff out? And I said, sounds good. Those are the kind of relationships I want to build. And if you show the country you're willing to do that here, then everybody else across the country will feel more empowered to be that way too. The president is such a unique job in the world. You set an example through everything you do. And one of my biggest problems with Donald Trump is he doesn't care. He doesn't care that he's setting an awful example for our children and our grandchildren. He doesn't care that he's making us look like rogues around the world. He doesn't care. He only cares about the person he sees in the mirror. And if that's the kind of president we have, then this is the kind of country we're going to have. Divided, angry, ugly, self-consumed. I think a president can change that, and that's exactly what I would intend to do. Yes, sir.
Welcome to New Hampshire.
Happy to be back.
I
It's my second home, for God's sake.